around March 30th, when Facebook pulls the windows off and actually complies and compels all brands to adopt to its timeline changes. So the outcomes for today's session, here's a look at what you're going to learn. You're going to understand the role of how the Facebook Community Manager will change. You'll understand how imagery is going to be just as important as words now on your Facebook page. You're going to understand 3 new strategic objectives to consider in your planning efforts. You'll understand how those changes might affect your skill set needs inside your organization or outside your organization with agencies. You'll get 2 key tips on visual display requirements that Facebook Timeline will demand. You'll get 4 key tips on new content attributes, and you'll get 3 key tips on measurement changes. And as an added benefit, being an attendee of this webinar, we'll also send you a link, and you'll get the information at the end of the session about a white paper that has all of the information in today's session, plus some extra goodies, all the things that you need to know about Facebook's changes for Timeline for Brands. So just a little bit of brief background about our presenters today. So first of all, Sean McDonald is Senior Vice President at AntiView, the head of the Austin, Texas office. Sean has lots of experience coming into here. He was a longtime member of Dell and had lots of experience with Dell.com in global brand building, global reputation management, and community management. David J. Neff is a senior consultant at Untitled and comes to us recently from the American Cancer Society, and he's also very knowledgeable and expert in social media and social media technologies. And myself, Ben McConnell. I won't talk about myself because Sean and Dave are going to be doing all the talking this afternoon. I'll be your moderator, and there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions. You can use the GoToMeeting system to ask questions and just pop those in there, and that at the end of their presentation, which will be about 30, 35 minutes, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A for any questions that you might have. Also, you are welcome to tweet about this session if you'd like, and the hashtag for that is AEV Briefing. And the @ symbol for AntiView is @AntiView. So without further ado, we're going to turn it over to Sean McDonald, and he's going to talk about Facebook's timeline for brands and the impact on strategy.
Good afternoon, and as we put this together, we got a lot of requests and questions from our existing clients around what does this really mean with the implementation of Facebook Timeline. So we went back and we started to look at a lot of different use cases and got under the covers both from a strategic and tactical level to really understand what would happen with the March 30 transition that will happen on Facebook. Taking a step back, though, when you look at why most brands are on Facebook, it really was to drive attention. Facebook has grown so large that it's considered either the 3rd or 4th largest country in the world, if it was a country, in terms of the number of registrants on it. So for most brands, it's just too big to ignore. But unfortunately for a lot of brands, they stake a claim on Facebook, they have their page set up, and they've been participating at different leveling degrees for a variety of objectives. First and foremost, usually they're about awareness, or you can't not be there. But what we've started to see, and AT&T is a very good example, even back in 2009, is that some brands started to experiment in terms of different outcomes, different benefits that they could accomplish using Facebook. And so the story with AT&T is that they were able to encourage and resolve customer service issues right there on the Facebook page. So on the wall, customers could ask questions. Facebook could answer those, AT&T could answer those questions. The obvious benefit is customer resolution, but a sideline benefit that AT&T enjoyed is that now they were very public and open, and they were resolving issues, and then it potentially could prevent the next 50 or 100 or 150 people that had a similar question to just read that and get an answer immediately. But what we're led to today is that we really are at a crossroads. With this adoption that goes in place March 30th, is that a reminder that Facebook holds all the cards. We're all just tenants in there. And when you are a tenant, is that you need to understand what are the changes that are being put in place. How will you continue to drive value from your presence on Facebook, and at the same time, resources adequately. When we think about resources and the impact it will have on your strategy is that there are a few obvious new objectives that are open to anybody now with the advent of timeline. A big one is about how do you share your brand heritage, and that's something that the brand itself usually knows best. Not everybody has a brand historian sitting on your staff, and it's not necessary that you have that. But with that is that people do want to share the heritage. They want to understand that within your heritage as a brand, there are differentiators. There are reasons why you're successful, what you've accomplished in either the last 5 years or last 50 years that really make you stand out. And similar to what we just talked about with the AT&T case study is now there's a greater opportunity to serve customers where they serve. So as customers and the engagement on your pages increase through the use of timeline, is that now there is that opportunity to serve or support customers as well. When opening up these objectives or even new objectives that you might decide with as you start to get efficiencies with the advent of timeline is that it's going to impact the design. So your layout of your page is going to change, but how you design content is really going to be different as well. Your customer service and support, if they were the folks that were running your Facebook page and responding primarily on the wall, that's changed as well. It doesn't mean that you can't respond to them, but your wall really isn't present anymore. It's going to be through timeline that these activities will come up. So when we think about resources and what the brands should be aware of and then start planning for is that the community manager can become, in the short term, a de facto brand historian. One suggestion that we have is that you can encourage and invite current fans that you have of your Facebook page to help sort of build that fan history. Because the history you know best about what happens inside your corporation, but your fans have personal experiences, points in their lives where now you can start to make that part of timeline. Your administrator for your Facebook page has more data that can help inform better business decisions, and we'll show some specifics of that when we switch over to David. And something that you should be cognizant of is that your digital agencies are probably looking right now of how to enhance image libraries, since imagery is going to be so much more important than text in the past. And when they do creative, it starts to bring how they think about their storyboards and timeline to more of a common functionality. As Facebook made this announcement, what they went on record saying is that they want a brand to become storytellers, and I think any brand would envy or appreciate and want to be a storyteller, but not all brands are great storytellers. A big reason that Facebook was moving this direction is that stories are memorable, repeated. If there are more stories, there's a higher level of engagement, that more people will spend time on Facebook. As a byproduct, though, also brands can be more successful with their branded pages. Posts tend to have a short shelf life. They're pushed down in a serial fashion based on recency of the post, and lots of times the post is there, and what's most interesting is around the comments. It's not the post itself. Imagery will take the forefront. So in timeline, it's about images. It's about pictures. There still is text there, but what is really going to grab the reader and the attention of the page will be those images. So that starts to become both vital for content and also for navigation. As timeline is a main tool on your home page on Facebook, it'll also be a key way that your users will navigate. So they will navigate by date and by visual identity that they're seeing on your page. And your participation as a brand starts to become a lot more evident. So it's no longer about wall posts. You need to consider more of a narrative in terms of what you do share on your page. And also because it is more visually appealing, it can also be potentially more visibly barren as well. So if your timeline starts to look barren, then frequency is more noticeable, and the opportunity for engagement can be reduced. So it does become a bit of a new frontier to master. The good news is there's information at your disposal already that start to make great candidates to build out timeline. Your company heritage, as we talked about, company values and culture, the people of your company. So now there's a much more expressive way to share that information through images, and also a way to put it in chronological fashion with the help of timelines, so people start to understand what was that evolution of the brand or maybe products that you've launched. The key thing that we probably all need to remind ourselves is that the power of imagery has always been here, is that human beings, for the most part, have been reading for the last 2,000 years, but we've been observing for 100,000 years. So it's a very natural behavior that all of us can easily learn to respond to. What we have to remember is that the images have to be used in some degree of a narrative versus putting a lot of images on your page. And with the implementation is that there are some new tools to learn and use, tools that will help in content management and brand engagement. So within Timeline, you're also going to see different apps that will be displayed where those used to be tabs in the old world will now be icons in the new world, front and center on Timeline. At this point, we want to get into more specifics, and David J. Neff is going to take us through and talk about some impacts on execution that we should all be aware of.
Thanks, Sean. I appreciate that. And we'll also just take a second to remind you guys, you can ask questions on Twitter using the hashtag AEVBriefing. There's a chat window, and then we will have some time for a Q&A at the end. So feel free to ask away in any of those channels. So we're going to talk about the impact of execution. And the first thing we're going to cover is the visual identity, content creation, and then end it with some tips on measurement. So as Sean alluded to, and the folks at Facebook and a lot of people in the industry have been talking about, there's definitely a return to visuals on Facebook, the importance of that, and that leading into storytelling, what's going on in your brand. The first thing that you guys will notice when they implement Timeline is the use of a cover photo. So a lot of people have seen this already on their own personal pages and are trying to figure out how best to use it, and the same thing is going to happen now for brands. This is an interesting spot in that brands used to be able to have an arrow suggesting that people like them, or having a contest in this space, or doing other things, call to action, and that's no longer going to be the case. This always needs to be a photo and never really a billboard, and you can't have those traditional call to action. So some of the great folks doing work with this are the folks at Lexus who are highlighting product lines with really clean, crisp photos of their cars. The other thing you'll notice is a real emphasis on your profile photo, which in this example you can see is the Lexus logo. A great kind of standard thing we've seen across a bunch of brands using this really well, plus read and seen from Facebook, is that use of a cover image being a product, and then the use of the profile photo being a logo that matches them color-wise. These two things really come together to work in conjunction. Another great example is the folks at Verizon who are actually talking to their users to say, take a cover image-worthy photo on your phone and send it to us. And they do daily updates of great photos for their cover image and highlight the users who took that photo. Which really makes your fans feel special that they got to do the cover image for your brand, through a contest. The big thing I think that we've seen too on the cover images is that they are not changing, that you want to leave your cover image up for a little bit unless you are doing something or highlighting a specific product, things like that. So the next visual tip is highlight apps. So Sean mentioned that iframes, pages, landing pages, about 15 different things that Facebook has called those for the past year have been changed, and they're now called apps. What you see below is a great example from Starbucks, highlighting everything from photos to their international work, to maps of locations, to their jobs, to videos. So these are no longer pages, as I said, but instead are actual apps. Unlike the cover photo and profile photo, you should really keep these thumbnails consistent And when you're actually designing some of these apps, think about how to look like on your Facebook brand page and what images you would want to use and how they can complement each other. You can keep it visually interesting by having all of the photos actually lead into one another, or have them look to be a part of your larger brand colors. The first content tip, moving into the content section, is one around the use of these photos. So Sean talks about this might impact creative services or your agency, enabling you to have a larger photo image library, things like that. And keeping these photos interesting, vibrant is going to be a big part of that. So this is a content tip. You can actually see the hotspots. Mashable did an eye tracking study on some pages, timeline versus the old format. And you can see a heat map of where people's eyes are drawn. And even with the big, larger cover photos now, you see some heat around that, but that profile image, that small little square, is still getting the most eyeballs, which is why we would recommend that be your logo or something very identifiable with your company. You can see also on this page that, once again, as Sean mentioned, the attention levels are towards photos and content updates versus static, normal text updates. The other really interesting thing for brands is that same Mashable study found, as far as advertising, timeline actually gets a much higher percentage of your users when you do run ads on Facebook paying attention to it. In fact, 63% more people notice your ads in the timeline format than they did before. So that's a good tip for those of you who are advertising on Facebook. So another content tip that's really new is a lot of users, when they rolled out timeline for individual posts, notice that stories and content flow even faster than it used to be. So it's sometimes very confusing. You lose important posts. So Facebook came up with the idea of pinning, and you can actually pin important content posts on your page. They'll stay there for around 7 days, giving them plenty of exposure. And these images, unlike your cover photos, can actually have a call to action. So it could be highlighting a specific app or a contest that you're doing, or that people need to like your page, things like that. We see Starbucks sharing some really visually interesting content on this page as well. And brand posts are the only ones that can be pinned, unfortunately. So even though you might have great content coming from your fans, those are not eligible for pinning just yet. The next tip goes along with apps and getting to know your apps. So you'll have 4 by default on your page, with photos always being the first category of app. You could never change that. So you'll see your cover image up above, you'll see your profile photo to the left, underneath that your traditional about us, and to the right of that you'll have 4 apps, with the ability to actually have 8 on the page. So you see here Lexus actually has a little bit of a content desert, and they have 3 empty boxes right there. So just think about that as you plan things, what you want to highlight, and that could be anything from videos to events to maps. There's a lot of content that you guys can put in there besides a traditional application or a game that you build for your brand or anything like that. The next tip is really, as Sean mentioned, is who's the historian for your brand? Who can tell your story? There's some brands out there that obviously go back 100 years or more and have actually gone in and filled in that entire timeline. We know a lot of community managers and content folks don't have the time to do that. But definitely in the next week or so, identify some key moments in your history, whether it's the day you were founded, whether it is an important event where you became a public company, something that identifies with who you are and what you stand for. We see here a pretty humorous example from Barack Obama's page of when Barack was born, and they're featuring the birther coffee mug there, and it's available at barackobama.com. The other interesting thing to know about timeline, a lot of us started to get used to it as users before we are getting used to it as brands. So use that knowledge. Use the fact that when you post videos and images of your family and friends, that gets a lot of content and attraction. And the same thing will happen on your brand page. The other new thing in timeline is the friend activity section has been sequestered. So no longer do you flip back and forth between what people are talking about on your brand versus what people are saying, about you. Instead, that's rolled into a box called Friend Activity. So be sure to check out that box to see who's talking about you and who's relating to your content. So the next section is measurement, and the first tip is that Facebook has given you yet another inbox to check as community managers and brand managers. This is very, very similar to what you all are experiencing on your Twitter accounts when folks direct message you. So now you're actually able to go in and receive messages from users. There's a great example of this you'll see in a future slide. And this is a one-on-one private communication between you and your fans. It could be customer service or them wanting to talk about a certain issue. The tip here is set expectations. Somewhere maybe in your About Us box, say, hey, our customer service hours are this hour to this hour, or we're only available on these days or the weekends. But set expectations for when people message you and when they'll want to actually receive replies. The other option is you can turn this off completely. So this is one of the few rare features of the new timeline rollout that's optional. The next thing we'll talk about is the activity log. So much like timeline was implemented to help people and brands understand content and see a history and a rich visual history of what's going on, it can also be confusing to scroll through that, find posts that people have commented on from a year ago, and you as brand managers and community managers be expected to monitor and control all of that. So luckily in the back end, they have taken timeline and made it into something they call activity log. An activity log is timeline in a simpler format, and only admins have access to this. So on activity log, you're actually able to go through all of your posts, change them, edit them, star them, pin them. You can actually change dates on your own posts. And of course, you can report and mark spam of people leaving strange things on your wall. So measurement tip. This is really important in that they've streamlined the actual dashboards you get on the back of your Facebook brand page, made it a lot easier to read, made the graphs a little more streamlined. You still have that great ability to export all of your content if you pivot tables or put it into an Excel document or do graphically interesting things with it. But the important part, the tip on this, is create new Facebook measurement goals. Now that the content is changing, now that you have less emphasis on maybe interaction with fans and more emphasis on content that you pin and their interaction around that, you really need to go back and change the numbers that you're looking for on Facebook. There's also a great thing that will affect those numbers as well in the future, especially for folks who are running advertising campaigns or pushing a lot of traffic to their brand page, is that there's quite a popular rumor going around that this Facebook data will soon be in real time. So you could go in and have up-to-the-minute stats on your campaigns versus waiting for a week or a day to get that feedback as well. They've also added a great tour, so if you're a new community manager, a new brand manager who hasn't experienced the back end of one of these pages before, they have a great PDF, they have a great tour on the site, and they just recently actually added video tutorials to walk you through this as well.
All right, David, thanks much for that tour of Facebook timeline and all the various tips. And just as a reminder here, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them during this webinar or afterward on Twitter using the hashtag AEV briefing, and then, or you can use the question box just right here in the webinar itself to submit a question, and we'll do our best to answer as many questions as you have. So, Sean, you just want to kind of take us through the key points that you covered and the things that people should remember?
Yes. So Facebook is launching this, and they are encouraging brands to become storytellers. And we all know some of the best storytellers in our lives and the best stories. They have a narrative. They are memorable, repeatable, and the way you'll accomplish a lot of this is through images. This is a great opportunity to look at your strategy. So if you put your Facebook page up a year or two or even longer than that, you probably had an idea of what you wanted to accomplish with Facebook. Now with these additional tools, the timeline, and data, it's an opportunity to say, are there additional objectives that we could get with the advent of timeline? And with this, there are some new skill sets that you just have to be cognizant of. Is that somebody who understands and writes or publishes in more of a narrative format. Also, someone who will be checking that inbox if you enable it as well. And then your admin that is now looking and measuring that data more frequently, because it's a lot richer data that you're going to be getting.
Some of the key points on execution that we discussed, the brand cover pages, really actually changing those for visual impact, but not using them as call to action. We talked about the tabs are dead, replaced with apps. We're sure Facebook will change that again in the future, but that's kind of the reality that we're living in, is the apps have replaced tabs. And then you can actually do really visually interesting things with your apps. And when designing apps, make sure you have kind of images in mind that relate up to your brand, or maybe if your brand has a playful demeanor, maybe the apps all kind of transition into each other. Brand history is going to be very important, as Sean mentioned, telling your brand story. It's a lot to go back and do, so we want you guys to just take kind of a measured approach to that and pick 2 or 3 important timeline events and get them on there before that March deadline. The admin has been redone. Timeline can be somewhat confusing for community managers, brand managers, so Facebook's giving you a great tool in the back called the activity log. Also, the email directly is very similar to a Twitter direct message, and once again, Facebook has made that optional. So if you're not ready to have that other inbox going, you can disable it and turn it on down the line. It's a very functional feature and can be turned on or off at any time. And then, it's really time to think about new KPIs, new goals for your Facebook page, because the content has changed so much. Your numbers and some of the original goals, the outcomes that you guys have are going to be changed because the content has changed so much with the addition of timeline rolling across the brand. So just keep an eye on what your new numbers and your new KPIs need to be.
Great, thanks, David and Sean. So we have a handful of questions in that people have asked. And again, if you have questions, go ahead and just click the question button in the GoToMeeting session. So one of the first questions is, can we repin the same story after 7 days?
That is a good question.
I guess if you repost it, you should be able to do it. It feels a little like gamesmanship to do that, so maybe make it a little bit different, update it in some way. Maybe you saw some comments around that original pinned post that would help you to make it different. Maybe the image stays the same, but some of the commentary influences it. The other thing that David called out is that users' posts cannot be pinned. There probably is some gamesmanship around that as well, which says you could, whatever they do write or share, is that you could give them some props and say this was from our person, and as long as the admin posts it, you can start to post it. So if there's some really good stuff, there are ways to get it pinned and repinned.
And I think that's something that Facebook's going to change. I can't see them not letting you express the voice of your customer for very long.
Okay, another question that comes in is, do you have any examples of other brands who are doing Facebook timeline pretty well so far?
I think in just some of the ones that I've seen, I think Coca-Cola is doing a really good job. We mentioned Lexus. I think Lexus has done an excellent job, even including that their project was originally a skunk works at Toyota and how it expanded out of there. So those are 2, along with the Barack Obama example that we included as well.
Yeah. It's somewhat subjective in terms of what a good job. I think what a good job at this stage in the game is maybe they're ahead of schedule. NBC Universal, I believe, is one of them, or the Today Show on NBC has done that. Trying to remember 1 or 2 others I looked at. Starbucks also is that if you love coffee and you love Starbucks, there's plenty of information on timeline now for you.
Another question that comes in is, why do you think Facebook is doing this timeline change now?
Well, one reason is that if brands Actually, if more people are engaging on Facebook, that's good for Facebook, which means more eyeballs on any ads that are on Facebook. The reason why it's now is that Facebook has initialed their IPO to go public, and this will be another way for Facebook to demonstrate growth in activity, and that it's a destination for both brands and ordinary citizens like ourselves. So there is a financial incentive. The capability, of course, was already there. They really test drove it with individual pages over the past year, and now that instead of asking brands, they're forcing brands really to support their public offering.
Another question that has come in is, if you share a fan photo or a post, then can you pin it?
I would say the answer to that would be yes. I don't think Facebook goes into that level of detail just yet, but I think that would make a lot of sense for them to enable that. As Sean said, that might be a little bit of gamemanship, and they might not just let you do that yet, but it makes sense in the overall scheme of things. And if not, if they did share something, you could repurpose that, upload it, share it that way as well yourself through the brand page.
Another question that comes in from our listenership here is, if you set the images for how do you set the images for the apps? I've been looking at my profile through this and can't seem to find an option to do this.
It's a good question. We cover that in the actual white paper that you guys will get, along with the sizes and things like that. And I think the easiest thing would be on that is, you know, like I said, we'll cover the sizes and how to upload those in the document.
And just as a reminder of that too, one of the questions is, when will we receive the white paper? So after this webinar, later this afternoon, you'll receive an email with a link to download the white paper. We consider that a shareable asset, so you're free to share it with any of your colleagues inside or outside the organization about using the timeline changes for Facebook. And just as a personal note, I want to thank Christy Bolsinger of Anti-View for putting together that white paper. We think it's an excellent piece of very shareable asset. All right, so next question is the photo tab comprised of photos posted to the wall, or does it include albums as well?
It includes albums as well, and also includes your cover photos, and then, you know, untitled albums or photos that you've uploaded as well.
Another question is that you mentioned that imagery will be even more vital going forward. What do you see as the role of video posts on timelines? Is it better to download videos onto Facebook or post them as YouTube links?
I would say on that, I think it's still very important. I would never not put anything on YouTube. I think you also, Facebook more and more will be pushing the fact that you can upload video to their platform. And although it is an extra step to upload to Facebook and then upload back to YouTube, it might be more and more important for you to do that. In fact, I've seen a couple of brands so far that actually have videos as one of their apps. And they have a nice little cover photo for the videos for the apps. And those, of course, are not YouTube videos. Those are videos uploaded to Facebook. So although it is an extra step, I think it will be more and more important in the future to upload videos directly to Facebook.
And another question that's come in is that, would you consider it a best practice to include stock imagery to be included with posts? If so, are those kept in the photo library on timeline?
I think, you know, I mean, it just depends on the stock image photos and what that needs to be. I think people obviously, now we have more and more sophisticated fans, more and more sophisticated base, so sometimes those stock images that you might grab can look a little outdated or not authentic versus photos that you take at your own events.
Or seen in other places, in other contexts.
Exactly. And what people want is behind the scenes of what's going on at your company or a new product, or that you're on set shooting a new commercial, or kind of behind the scenes glimpses of brands. So, you know, I would still steer clear of a lot of those stock images. Try and produce your own, or work with an agency to produce your own photos as well.
Great. Well, that seems to be all the questions. Last question is, are we recording this session? Yes, we are. And So we will provide information on how to access the recording, and we'll probably do that in the email as well. You'll receive the notification for the white paper and the URL to download it from, and then we'll probably also send you an email requesting your feedback about this session. Just a very short 1 or 2 question survey asking not only what you thought about the session, but if you have any suggestions or ideas for future briefing sessions that we might be able to provide you or any of your colleagues inside your company. So that's going to wrap it up for this executive briefing series. Thanks again for attending. So on behalf of Sean McDonald and David J. Neff, thanks much for listening and tuning in.